There is going to be the next step of evolution in humans. It's not going to stop. Will it be within this body that we know of, or will it be an evolved body?
We have the immortals who exist. We have Hanumanji, we have Mahavatar Babaji. So certain individuals have lived on this planet and have achieved immortal bodies, and they are still here.
So where are they? How are they? How do they look?
If you study diseased cells, they have a very low vibration. And if you study healthy cells, they have a high vibration. If you study the vibration of jealousy, anger, hatred, shame, guilt, very, very low vibrations. And the higher it vibrates, it becomes energy that can now hold and express higher consciousness, such as love. And therefore, even the cell that is vibrating with love cannot be sick. How many universes do you think are there in this world right now? It's an infinite game.
How can Shakti lead me to immortality?
Savitri's love for a Satyavan that says, I will not accept death because my love is greater than his death. It's a love so grand that with its compassion, it would not allow death to be immortal, permanent thing. Like death would die eventually.
Because of the power of love.
Yes.
So one can conquer death through love.
Yes.
Neelima Bhatt, Indica Cultural Changemaker Fellowship Awardee, is a visionary in conscious leadership and well-being. Its flagship initiative, the Shakti Fellowship, aims to empower 1 lakh women changemakers by 2035 in collaboration with institutions such as the University of San Diego.
What are the powers of the Shakti that I can gain access to in real time?
Matangi is supposed to be one of the Dasha Mahavidyas, and she is like a tantric form of Mahasaraswati. You invoke her with a certain mantra. There is a yantra that goes with that. When you draw that yantra, it's as if that energy of that Shakti becomes visible. Now there is a bindu in the center of that yantra. When you are praying with that, you are breathing in and out with that bindu into yourself, into your third eye, into your heart. You are invoking and activating or merging with that Shakti.
Can you give us one such mantra?
It is the sound to activate your antaratma, your soul. Let me just give you the simplest one. All life becomes yoga when your breath is with your mantra. Offer every breath to the divine, and so you divinize every breath. Path of Tantra and Shakti is saying, if you stand on the very source of your life force, you're going to be dead. You're going to be a walking ghost. You can't suppress it. You will get diseased, or you will come out in a perversion.
She's the co-author of Shakti Leadership and My Cancer Is Me, 2 groundbreaking works that bridge inner transformation with global systems change. Her work has been spotlighted by the UN, World Bank, and Nobel Peace Prize forums, and she has led transformative programs for Microsoft, Whole Foods, and Tata. We're honored to have with us in today's spiritual episode of the Body to Being podcast, Miss Neelima Bhatt.
Let's open to the psychic being, the soul within, with Om Ma 3 times. Then we'll do Om Shri Ma, and then we'll do Om Anandamayi Chaitanyamayi.
Namaskaram.
Namaskaram, Shloka.
Pleasure to have you.
So happy to be here.
A fellow naval kid.
I know. 40 brats.
Yes. We've been pursuing you for a while now, and I'm so glad that I'm finally getting to have a conversation with you.
I'm flattered. Thank you.
This has been long awaited, and the conversation is around Shakti. It's going to be around the Rahasya Gyan. So all our viewers are going to be very excited. I want to begin by asking you, you are the founder of Shakti Kumbh. You have taken the onus of reviving the Indic Vedic traditions from the Dasha Mahavidya to Ashtasiddhis to the Sri Yantra Vidyas and so many others in its absolute purity, depth, dimension. Give us an overview of these Rahasya Gyan or the Gupt Gyan, and why is it called Rahasya Gyan in the first place?
So Shakti, right? This is a word everyone thinks. We know we are from India. हम तो हिंदू धर्म का पालन करते हैं. शक्ति हाँ जानते हैं. But the truth is very, very few people really know what is Shakti, how to invoke Shakti, how to relate to Shakti, how to benefit from Shakti. Very, very few people know it. And there is a reason for that, which is Shakti is the innate power of existence. If the innate delight of existence is called Ananda, that actually this entire creation is infused, is filled with delight, with bliss, with Ananda. this entire creation that you and I are and everything is made of a inherent power, and that power is Shakti. It's supremely intelligent. It is running the whole show. Think of a fancy Mercedes-Benz car. उसमें अगर gas नहीं है, तो क्या फायदा? Correct? So Shakti is that fuel in the tank that's running this whole show. So obviously, those few people, the rishis, the yogis, all the great adepts who have had the good fortune through tapasya or grace to have touched upon this power, it's like a very critical energy. It's like nuclear. Why are we scared of nuclear energy? बंदर के हाथ में पटाखा भी हो सकता है ना, कि the energy in the wrong hands
Correct.
can
Decimate.
destroy.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So those who have discovered Shakti, and these are all the incredible ancient masters of this land, not that Shakti hasn't been discovered in other parts of the world by other masters. In India, in this land, we discovered this incredible potency that can be used. It can be used to create, to manifest, to change things, to transform things, to create something adbhut, right? Even the quest for immortality can be powered by this innate power of the universe, right? So that's the whole story of Savitri, for example, correct? You can even overcome Yama, the god of death. If you
Okay.
know how to find the Shakti behind death as well, then you can conquer and transmute death as well with the Shakti that you now have, right? So this, no wonder it is called like a Rahasya. Rahasya is what? Is a mystery. And the meaning of mystery is something that is not known in the ordinary consciousness. It is something that is deeper, and there's a reason it is deeper, because it should not be made available to someone who will misuse it. Shankaracharya coming up with Saundarya Lahari and that whole story of how this is, many people dispute that this was a story, but I like it because it makes a point, which is that he was all about, Advait and, Mithya and Maya, this world, let's deny it. And, Brahman alone is real. And then apparently the goddess said, why are you discounting me? Why are you not acknowledging that I exist? So she apparently stopped functioning in him. He was conscious, but that's all he was. He was like an inanimate, dead person for all practical reasons, right? Because he was only awake with the Shiva Tattva in him, but no Shakti, no energy to move anything. So apparently he went down on his knees. He
So
was
he was
saying,
aligned to Shankar, the Shiva,
Yeah.
Tattva, and not the Shakti.
not to Shakti.
Okay.
So the story goes that Shakti one day said, okay, I stopped functioning. You don't believe I exist. So I might as well stop functioning in you. In that moment, apparently he fell on his knees, obviously, because you're like a puppet, without any energy if the Shakti leaves you. So he just falls on his knees. And in that moment, he cries, Ma, apparently, right? Ma. When you are so lost, you become a child, and spontaneously the call is to the mother. And so she appears and says, I exist. How can you deny me, right? I am the divine mother of the entire universe. You exist because I created you, and you exist in me. Another way of saying this would be that I am the subject, you are the object. So to close on the Shankaracharya story, when he goes down on his knees and cries to Ma, then when he realizes what he's missing, that he's only been looking at Brahman or the divine as only one side of the coin and denying the existence of the other side. He's only saying there is effectively only Shiva and there is no Shakti. Then his love for the mother begins, right? And that is how he writes Saundarya Lahari eventually. So anyone who reads that, it is incredible the way he describes the breasts of the goddess and the shape of her waist. And, it's like, what? That is the level of rasa. What the goddess brings, what Shakti brings to all of us is the final aim of incarnation. We could be Shiva, we could be sitting in nothingness, potentiality, just being Brahman. Why do we choose to incarnate as divine souls, individual aspects of the divine? Why do we even incarnate to experience this body, this breath, this mind, these emotions? Because we come for rasa anubhav. We want to taste the many juices.
Some say it would be karma. It's the karma that is leading to bondage, and therefore you're in this body.
Who started the game in the first place? I'm back to that. She's the subject, we are the object. The original point is a divine play. It's a leela. It's a fabulous pastime by the divine in its two aspects of Shiva and Shakti, saying what are the incredible potentialities inside us that we can continue to manifest and make as perfect as possible.
You know, it is said Shiva rode 84 times and we had the Big Bang, right? Which modern science today would call the Big Bang. There was nothingness. From nothingness came something which we call as Shakti. And then one day everything will still go back into nothingness or Shiva. So if Shiva is the ultimate reality, what is the use of Shakti in the between?
So, according to them, seem to say that this world is a Maya or a Leela. We come from Shunya, nothingness, call it Parashiva, call it Brahman, whatever you call source. We come from that, and but it's not real, it's a dream. And finally, you're not supposed to take it seriously and you're not supposed to be attached to it because eventually the diseased body and death will happen. And then you go back for moksha and mukti.
Correct.
That is the real aim.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, people like Mother and Sri Aurobindo question this. They are saying, you think this incredible intelligence that is Shiva, Brahma, whatever you call the divine, you think it will create a myriad forms of apples and a myriad kinds of flowers, and it's creating a myriad kinds of this incredible thing called creation. It's just being created to be avoided and negated and to just return to nothingness. Saying that's not a good enough explanation. What a waste of creative energy. What if actually the answer is something else? What if the purpose of this creation is to truly manifest all potentiality in such a divine and perfect and beautiful way that this divine pastime can carry on in infinite ways? So there are these two levels of being. There is the para and apara, like the two hemispheres, right? So the supermind level is the middle layer, right? Above is Satchidananda, the supermind level, and then there is the whole mind, life, body below it, right? So what if we can find ourselves to the level of the supermind? Like after that, we don't have to drop again because the supermind is the first level of the para. It is the first level of divinity available to humanity.
Which
right?
is immortality?
And from there, immortality starts.
Okay.
Right?
So how is it different from moksha?
Moksha is about saying my soul will return to these higher dimensions and rest there. And maybe I have worked out enough of my karma, seeds, etc. So I don't need to come back to complete what is incomplete in me, what is unexpressed, unfinished in me. I don't then need to come back, right? I will no longer take on a human body.
I'll be a part of the consciousness.
Yes.
Moksha.
Yes. Yes.
So will these superminds become,
These superminds are already in moksha. They're already carrying divinity consciousness. Kind of the lowest rung of it. Well, apparently beyond that, there are even higher wonderful planes of consciousness.
how many such?
Well, at a minimum, you have the Sat Chitananda, right? 3.
So you have the supermind and then 3 levels more?
Yes.
And what happens after that?
No, that is it. That is the fullness, the wholeness.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought the game ended after moksha.
No.
That's so interesting.
No. So therefore, even this thing of what is a bodhisattva? Would you call a bodhisattva someone who's got moksha? So this comes from the Buddhist tradition.
Right.
That you attain the goal of, say, nirvana and you attain enlightenment. But then you look around you and you say, I have escaped the cycle of birth and death because I burnt all my karma and I'm done. But then you look around you and you say, what about all these millions of fellow humans who are in suffering? So then you say, I will not go any further.
I will come back.
I'll come back and I will stay here and I will help until every last person is enlightened.
Aha, that's why you have gurus coming back
Yes.
and with that mission of
Yes. And then there's no end. There is no end to creativity. The Divine Mother's Shakti's capacity for creativity is infinite. So this game will then go from one level of beauty to the next level of beauty, from one level of complexity to the next level of complexity. How many universes do you think are there in this world right now? We look up at the stars. How many are there? Who knows? How many can we see and how many can't we see beyond that? So it's infinite. It's an infinite game, right? But we are the ones who are experiencing it as light and dark and life and death and pain and pleasure. So in the integral yoga, we talk about triple transformation. That we have a triple Aadhar, mind, life, body. That's physical, vital, mental, Annakosh, Pranakosh, Manakosh. And that if we can bring the 3 divinities accessible to us, the immanent divine, the Antaratma, the cosmic divine, the Jagadatma, and the transcendent divine, the Paramatma. If we can bring, and that is opened through the heart and the forehead and the crown, we have access to 3 levels of divinity. We can bring those down into this triple Adhar and achieve a triple transformation.
But I see you, shedding a very positive light on life perpetuating on this planet and the beings being in this body. I'm not obsessed about it, but I do have a desire to break the cycle of life and death. Because in my mind, a being in the body is a trap. The body is a conduit to suffering, and therefore I would want to break it. I see you, adding a very positive connotation to the being that to my mind is trapped in the confines of the body.
Thank you. This is not me. This is Mother and Sri Aurobindo and integral yoga, right? Which is the realization. These were great, great enlightened masters. Many believe they are avatars, that if after Rama came Krishna, that after Krishna have come these avatars who are going to take the evolution forward. Right? So man is not the last rung in evolution. Evolution hasn't completed its job. It's such an incomplete person. Look at us. If we think we're the final rung of evolution, how pathetic. This wonderful intelligence called Prakriti and, innate intelligence, you think it's going to stop with who we are today? Just look around. What a mess we are. So clearly we are a work in progress. And this body and this matter is therefore also evolving. Why do we think it's not capable of transmuting itself and creating a newer, higher, better plasticity and substance? Why can't we attain an immortal body? Why can't we attain a divine life in a divine body so that when we come as souls to experience embodiment in a substance called matter, why should this matter have to go through disease, decay, and death? Then you shed the body, and then you come back again in a new body, start again, take your growth. It's like growth keeps having in little parcels. This, according to Mother and Sri Aurobindo, this is a very inefficient process that nature hasn't fully worked out yet. And that something more is to come.
What is that more?
That is the more. If from a mineral, you got a plant. If from a plant, you got animals. If out of animals, you've got humans. Out of humans, we are going to get a new species.
Yeah?
Yes. And that species they call the supramental. That will carry not an ordinary mind, but a super mind, a mind that is higher, that is coming from that rung of the Satchidananda that is now available to this earth plane, this terrestrial plane. So now with this new energy that has been brought down through their tapasya, and I'm sure many others that we may or may not know of, but I know for sure Mother and Sri Aurobindo did the work of bringing down this plane of consciousness that is Mahas or supermind. It's once it comes down into this mind, life, body, this triple Adhar that we have, right? We have Pranakosh hai, Annakosh hai, Manakosh hai. Into this, if we are bringing down a higher principle, it comes with its own capacities. Our mind has given us a capacity of rationality, reasoning, thinking, but it doesn't know how to enter into the substance of matter and transmute and divinize it, for want of a better word, so that it shows sufficient elasticity, plasticity, so that when I come and take on this substance called body, this body will transmute itself as needed, regenerate itself as needed, and stand with me, walk with me as long as needed, and I complete all the experiences I came to have as a soul in this earth plane.
Okay, so I'll tell you what I understood. There is going to be the next step of evolution in humans. It's not going to stop here.
Yes.
This is going to happen through the supermind. Will it be within this body that we know of, or will it be an evolved body? Let's say maybe 3 hands, 3 legs, 2 heads. I'm just giving an example. Is the physical DNA going to be the same?
Very good question. Apparently, it will be a different kind of body. It will not come with the usual mating of man and woman. Those bodies will arrive in a different way. They'll be created, probably mind-born or whatever. I mean, that level of detail, I don't know. But they have shown, or they have told, that it's the kind of body that can be in 2 places at the same time, that can regenerate itself. In fact, when you talk about those Ashtasiddhis, like when you say Garima, Laghima, Hanuman. So look, This is not something new. We have the immortals who exist. We have Hanumanji, we have Babaji,
I've heard of
right?
that. Mahavatar Babaji.
Mahavatar
Yeah.
Babaji. So certain individuals have lived on this planet and have achieved immortal bodies, and they are still here. So when they manifest, they could be something as they can come as a spark of light and suddenly appear before you as a whole being,
And where are the other wives?
living in the realm of light.
In this loka?
In a subtle, yeah. Apparently, right next to this physical, there is a subtle physical plane, right? Which is kind of invisible to us, but it's there. And therefore, they can cross the veil between the two and show up here and go back there. And you can become big, you can become small. It's basically matter doing what you need it to do, to give you the kind of vehicle you need to have the experiences you want, to fulfill the purpose of your taking on a body.
Do we have such an evolved species as we speak in today's time?
Species, no. The only species that will become that is the human species. This is our destiny.
Do we have a human species who's evolved to that?
A person?
In the present time, yes.
It depends. They say Sri Aurobindo will come back as the first supramental being
When?
he hasn't. Mother said when the supramental energy came down, it was 29th of February 1956. She said, you know what, now it went deep into the inconscious, the very core of the earth, and it's kind of working itself out from there. It's transmuting and divinizing things from the deepest, darkest levels of unconsciousness, is working itself out from there. Meanwhile, from the higher realms, the energy continues to pour down. So there is a ascent taking place from inside out and up, and there's a descent taking place. And that's why if you see Sri Aurobindo's symbol, there are two interconnecting triangles which show a square of perfection of matter, Prithvi square, which has the ocean of consciousness, and a lotus which represents the avataric consciousness in it, right? So that symbol is a metaphor for what is the process that is underway on the planet right now. She said it could take up to 300 years, who knows? But she also said the grace is capable of overwriting all karma, all so-called laws of nature. She's saying grace can overturn everything. Finally, what matters is, are there sufficient human bodies and souls who are capable of receiving that grace and being surrendered to the action of it, right? So it could go faster.
Okay, wow.
So Sri Aurobindo was already supposed to be a great enlightened master. So why did he need another partner to do his work? So the way it goes is, at least at this earth plane, this terrestrial consciousness, that to come into your full potency, both the complements have to be there, the Shiva Tattva and the Shakti Tattva, the divine masculine and the divine feminine. When those two come together, I think Mother said this. She says, without him, I exist not. Without me, he is unmanifest, right? So they are one and the same thing. They are two sides of the same coin. Now, if you are here to create the next level of species, the next rung of evolution on this planet, to create a next species that will be as different from man as man or human is from animal, as animal is from plant, as
That
plant
different, huh?
that different.
Wow.
Okay, so if you are here to create that, then in a way the forerunners of that next species has to come and work together and to enable it for the whole species, right? He needs his Shakti. So finally, the work of transmutation, transformation, any change is effected by the creative power of Shakti. The holding of the awareness, the protection of Shakti's creative energy, the anchoring of it is the Shiva. Witnessing of her joy of creation and enjoying her joy of creation is Shiva. But the actual act of transforming, of changing, of transmuting is Shakti. So, if we are here to transmute death, again, according to Mother and Sri Aurobindo, death is simply a bad habit life forms on this planet have learned. And we need to unlearn the habit, because we're all made up of matter. We're all made up of cells. And the cell is capable of divinity. This is when Mother went into her yoga of the cells towards the end of her physical embodiment. She was doing what's called yoga of the cells. And she found that every cell is so pure and perfect and capable of divinizing itself. But she says around it is a kind of atavistic, mechanical mold or mind, like a cage that sits around it, that keeps driving the same thought pattern. And these cells have such limpid plasticity. It's thinking of a record जिसके ऊपर आप थोड़ा भी scratch कर दो तो फिर वो वही खेलता रहेगा program, correct? So it's the same thing, that the cell has a pattern or
Memory?
a programming, a memory that says, oh, I am a cell. As long as I have life, I'm going to have growth, then I will have some disease and some decay, and then I have to die. And she says that may have been part of a certain phase of evolution, but that's not the final way in which life on this planet can be or needs to be, that it can work death out of evolution.
Wow. There is more to human evolution. It doesn't end here. There is something called the supermind, which is going to be an evolved being, both physically, mentally, and on the pranic or the energy level. And it's going to take up to 300 years
Yes, or less.
or less.
Or more.
We don't have a supermind presently as we speak.
Yeah.
So
Well,
even the Sri Aurobindos of the world, and I mean all the enlightened beings and the
Yeah.
gurus,
Yeah.
they're also not in the supermind. Is
no,
that
they're
correct?
not. In fact, even Sri Krishna is supposed to be overmind, which is one level below supermind.
Oh.
Yeah. If death has to be conquered, then frankly, in the ladder of evolution, the levels of consciousness, if overmind is one level below supermind and there's more even beyond that, then death is just at the level of the prana kosh, no? Right? So, but it's such an immutable law for the longest time, right? That to conquer it, that is the story of Savitri. And Sri Aurobindo wrote the book Savitri. He literally channeled it. He would walk up and down, and in a stream of consciousness, he would dictate. And it's mantrik, those words. They're cantos, chapter by chapter. I mean, it is mind-blowing, that book called Savitri. It's just been channeled from his supermind. He channeled it straight down. And the story he has chosen is of Savitri. And Savitri is, in a way, the Divine Mother is represented by Savitri, and Satyavan represents the human soul, right? That the Divine Mother comes down to save humanity from death, to conquer death. And so when in this original story, death comes and takes Satyavan's soul and starts walking off, and she keeps going after, and death says, enough, yahan se aage nahi aa sakte, your human realm ends here, you can't go here. But in the book, when you read, you see that Sri Aurobindo is in a way describing the mother, who we call the mother, Mira Alfasa, who we call the mother. She was such a high integral yogini that she became the consciousness of the Divine Mother, which is why he would call her Divine Mother. Her spiritual inner experiences took her past all these realms, beyond death, all the way to the Supreme itself. And she secures, so by the way, the Supreme, interestingly, unlike what a Buddha calls a nirvana, which is like a shunya, null, nihil place.
And what yogis would call Mahasamadhi. I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
apparently there is much beyond that. Okay, and what's beyond that is finally is a being, is a consciousness that you can petition, that you can seek boon from. And so she gets...
But it's non-physical.
It's non-physical, right? But it's a being. It's a being. It's a presence. It is in the whole consciousness, but it is not an impersonal consciousness, meaning there is a person to it. There is a being to it that you can be in conversation with, that responds to you, right? So yes, it is both impersonal, but it can also be personal. So apparently from that highest level, she gets the boon for earth and for humanity, that suffering will end with the conquest of death, that death need no longer be an immutable law for this planet. And here, what is so beautiful, it's not just power, it is love. So the final real confrontation and the dialogue is between love and death.
Really?
Yeah.
How so?
It is her incredible love at a very basic level of a Savitri's love for a Satyavan that says, I will not accept death because my love is greater than his death, right? But at a very whole and complete level, it's the idea that the consciousness, the oneness, the being that you call the divine is actually made up of such love that it would not want death as a permanent thing, and because of the pain and the suffering that comes with it, right? So love is the greatest medicine and a power. I'm not talking human love. We don't even understand.
Okay.
When they speak of love, it's a potency, it's a force, it's a truth, and it's a greater truth than death. It's a love so grand that with its compassion, it would not allow death to be a immortal, permanent thing. Like death would die eventually.
To continue watching shorter pieces of this content, you can subscribe to Shloka Clips on YouTube.
You know, you spoke about tapping into the powers of the Shakti. What are the powers of the Shakti, very simply put, that I can gain access to in real time? And what are the ways through which I can tap into the Shakti?
So, since everything is energy, everything is vibration, which can be solidified into a form or a sound, all of these are forces, all of these are Shaktis. There's an infinite spectrum of Shakti, right? But each of these carries a unique vibration and a unique form. So, in the Indic system, in the yogic system, in the tantric system, they're called mantras and yantras, right? So, if you say, who is Matangi, right? Matangi is supposed to be one of the Dasha Mahavidyas, and she is like a tantric form of Mahasaraswati, right? So there is a certain vibration, and therefore you invoke her with a certain mantra. There are mantras, there are bija mantras, which are pure sounds, syllables. There is a yantra that goes with that. When you draw that yantra, it's as if that energy of that Shakti becomes visible in that moment on that paper in that form, right? And now there is a bindu in the center of that yantra. When you are praying with that, you are breathing in and out with that bindu into yourself, into your third eye, into your heart, into your crown. You're breathing in and out with that bindu. It's as if you're invoking and activating or merging with that Shakti, right? And when you're chanting the mantras or the bija mantras, you are also now activating through sound that energy that is in you.
So if I want to bring the super mind, the evolved energy into me, what is that one technique that you can give?
So as with everything in yoga, there is a mantra, right? Sri Aurobindo has given the world a Gayatri for the supramental energy. And we all know the Gayatri mantra given by Rishi Vishwamitra, which is Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Sri Aurobindo's Gayatri, and I can just chant it. I am not a good chanter of this beautiful Gayatri. There are much nicer versions you can find online. I'll just do it the best I can. So it goes like this. Tat Savitur Varam Rupam Jyoti Parasya Dhimahi Yanna Satyena Deepayet. That's it. Om Tat Savitur Varam Rupam Jyoti Parasya Dhimahi Yanna Satyena Deepayet. Calling that truth light. Right? Calling that truth light. And when you chant this, you actually sit with that visualization, imagining the plane just above you, sending golden light into your whole being. Feel it in the heart, and then from your heart, feel it come out into all your cells. You can even end with imagining a sun above you, sending rays of light, and every ray is falling in every cell, and every cell turning into a little droplet of golden light, like a smiley. Right? So imagine every cell popping awake, smiling, right? Radiating light in all directions. So every cell becoming a sun of truth. So these are your visualizations, your prayers, your bhav, your attitude with which you can listen to this Gayatri of Sri Aurobindo or chant it. It's available everywhere. You just look for Sri Aurobindo's Gayatri.
It is said that for men, the power of semen has been spoken about, right? Semen retention and how you can take those to higher peaks and then use that to evolve, which is why celibacy for men. For women, it is said that there is no such thing as retaining your semen. So if I heard this from someone that I was recently chatting with at the Isha Foundation, and she said that if an individual, a man here, enters into a sexual act and has a release, it takes up to 6 months for him to get back to that sense of exuberance or energy, if you will. But that may not be true for women. I want to know your take on this. Does sexuality for women deplete their prana or energy or have some negative impacts on their spiritual process?
For sure. Because every action has a reaction. Everything has a consequence. If you engage in this act at a certain low level of consciousness, you will have a repercussion and an outcome at that level of consciousness, right? So when you receive a man into your body as a woman, you're not just receiving the physical stuff, you're also receiving all the energy of maybe other people he has been with. It's all around in that space, isn't it? So be very careful what you're receiving into your womb, because your womb is meant to be clean as a temple so that it can receive the divine as its vigraha. Right? It is here to receive divine life and not lust. Point is, a woman and a man, a husband and a wife, can enter into this act with a certain level of sincerity and purity and invocation, right? They can make it a very beautiful process. She can invite the Shakti into her body. He can invite the Shiva into his body. Both of them can surrender their body to the ground in which Shiva and Shakti are enacting their lovemaking. You can take this into a very beautiful prayer kind of ritual. You can reach for a bliss that is beyond a vital, lustful release, right? So, for sure, I mean,
But it is still lustful, no? At the
but
end.
fine, at least you are taking it into a higher vibration. So, we are not here to deny these drives. They lead to life, procreation.
So one can conquer death through love.
Yes.
How can I do it?
This is a deep one, and it's interesting that Sri Aurobindo uses the story, a love story, between Savitri and Satyavan. But finally, really, it's a love story with yourself, right? Inside you, you have a Shiva Tattva and you have a Shakti Tattva. You have a divine masculine, which is your witness consciousness, your presence, and you have a divine feminine, which is your unique creative energy. And the ability to marry them and to achieve their sacred union inside you in a way that your whole mind, life, and body becomes a temple in which that divine union can live and play and make love and express itself, puts you in a state of love. Then that inner wholeness, you love because you have become love, not because you got love from somewhere.
You are love.
You are love.
It's a state of being. Love
Yes.
then becomes a state of being. It's not
Yes.
an act. It's not a verb.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, very deep.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I become love, I can
Yeah.
conquer death?
Yes, eventually that is what is the premise of this, that in a way to achieve that degree of love, becoming love, you will get that as a descent of grace, as a gift of grace from that supramental level. That's the level at which the truth of love really begins.
And which is why Bhakti Yoga is one of the most powerful ways to
Yes.
liberate yourself. These are
Yes.
the most powerful, the most quickest among all the 4 legs of yoga. So if I'm on the path of Bhakti, then I'm assuming this becomes easier, conquering death?
Very much. Because the path of this divine life in a divine body is the path of deep and integral and ultimate unconditional surrender to the Divine Mother, right?
Okay.
For that, you need bhakti, right? It's very hard with your mind,
Correct.
with Gyan Yoga.
Or with energies, Kriya
yeah,
Yoga.
Yeah. So if you wish to be in a state of divine love, then go ahead. You don't have to wait for someone to do it for you, someone to love you. You don't need someone to caretake you. You don't need someone to validate you. You can raise yourself into this state of blissful union, love, surrender, bhakti to the Divine Mother and say, I'm yours. Come and be mine. Come and take hold of this whole being. Live inside me. Eat with me. Pray with me. Sing with me. Dance with me. In every moment, be with me. You do the yoga for me, right? And then, because her nature is love, if the divine is made of a substance, that substance is Ananda, which is love, then that is substance inside you too, which can get activated. As they say in today's language, it comes online. It was offline. It comes online. And now, can you make yourself feel this in your cells? Right? So there are days, I'm sure you felt this, for no reason at all, you can be very spontaneously happy. Or you can just be so loving
Yeah.
that you look at
Absolutely.
anyone on the street and you will give them this
Outpouring of
beaming
affection, yeah.
smile of, God's in his heaven and all's well with my world, right? Who made that feeling? You made it. You activated your inner cornucopia, your inner pharmacy, your inner chemistry lab. You have done something. So, this is what makes the human being unique in the creation so far. We have been given free will and a rationality and a emotionality that we can work with consciously. If you study diseased cells, they have a very low vibration. And if you study healthy cells, they have a high vibration. Even emotions, vibrations, if you study the vibration of love, peace, joy, it's a very high vibration. If you study the vibration of jealousy, anger, hatred, shame, guilt, very, very low vibrations, right? So everything finally is energy that is vibrating. And the lower it vibrates, the more it solidifies into dense, unchangeable matter. And the higher it vibrates, it becomes energy, right? That can now hold and express higher consciousness, such as love. And therefore, even the cell that is vibrating with love cannot be sick. So, this is a very important point the mother makes in her health and healing work. She says, peace and disease are mutually exclusive, they cannot coexist. When there is peace in every cell of your body, you cannot be sick.
I have a question here. If you look at some of the great yogis, right? They died of cancer.
Yeah.
From Neem Karoli Baba to Ramakrishna Paramhans,
Yeah.
right? Cancer. Even Jesus is said to, he could have healed himself. Jesus is a yogi. But he fell prey to whatever forces. If this holds true, why is it that they fell sick?
This has a answer given by many, and I believe it. I'll just repeat it. When you come as a guru, you're not here just for your own enlightenment and your own bliss. You have come with a purpose, which is to take a flock up with you, right? And very often, when you becoming a guru, unfortunately, most people today who think it's a fad and it's a brand, and can I become a guru and can I have shishyas and I'll earn money from them? Gosh, you pay a big price to be a guru. At a spiritual level, you're taking on the karma of your students. And out of great love and compassion, after a guru has attained his highest level of enlightenment, then he uses the rest of his life to burn the karma of his followers. He can take their disease into his body, her body, and use it to transmute or allow it to be suffering in that body because they are already enlightened. They are not feeling the pain and the suffering, but it's taken out from the person where it was causing pain and suffering. These are very, very high acts of sacrifice. So according to Sri Aurobindo, every power has a being associated with it. It's not just some inanimate force. There is a being or there's a consciousness that owns that power. So if we want to come into...
Such as, if you can give us
If I want
examples.
to access abundance, prosperity, I have to propitiate Mahalakshmi, right? At a lower level, you can say Kuber and so on, right? But if you want the true abundance that comes from the divine of both spiritual and material wealth, then the being who holds that is Mahalakshmi, right? If you want a tremendous, fierce power to fight every falsehood, to destroy every falsehood, that power is held by Mahakali. So you will propitiate Mahakali, right? You will invoke her. And then you have to do the yoga, the sadhana, the tapasya, the prayer, if nothing else, to them and ask for what you are asking and sincerely surrender the outcome to their will and not your will. Because when this tantra, this methodology, this mechanism, this is what tantra simply means, a way to act and do things, some sort of a methodology or mechanism. If a tantra is done with personal gain as its intention, then you are playing a very risky game here. Because whatever is being asked from your ego, you may be able to tap into that vibration and generate the outcome you want. But if you're going to use it for ego and personal gain, which is not for the highest good of
Such
all.
as I want more property, I want more money, I want a better job, right? This is coming from the ego. If I ask for this, then
If you ask for it, but you do not surrender the outcome of it back to the divine source, be careful, because you may get what you asked for, but you'll have some unexpected negative side effect and price to pay. Right? Because you don't know the whole picture, and you've just asked for a small piece of something, not knowing what the whole story was. And then the whole story will unravel. Right? So be very careful. So,
you surrender it to the divine.
yeah,
Saying that make things work for me as
Yeah.
per your discretion.
Yes, this is what I want. By all means, pray. If you sincerely want something. Now, of course, be careful with your prayers. Check in with how sincere am I as I'm praying. Do I really want this? Is it my false ego self, my self deception that is asking for this? Or is it my true, sincere self that is asking for it? Do that little editing inside yourself. That is very necessary. Be sincere, be humble, right, in your ask. Be grateful in your ask. These are the three first things: sincerity, humility, gratitude. In Mother's symbol, there are 12 qualities. These are the first three. Foundational, right? So by all means, there are times we go down on our knees because we need something. We are at our wits' end and our strategies are not working anymore. We want a higher intervention. We want a greater help, right? By all means, pray. That power is given to us, right? So pray and ask sincerely with humility, and ask in a way that is not going to harm or hurt anybody else, right? Including yourself. Therefore, you say at the end of that prayer, this I think is what's good for me and everyone. This is what I'm asking for. I'm giving it to you. Here, thy will, not my will, be done. And then again, the mother says, every prayer is answered. Every sincere prayer is answered. Every call is met. What an assurance. What an assurance. Every call is met. Every prayer is answered. Right? So it's just that she says, you may not see it in the way you expect to see it. It may not come in the time you think it should come. But trust, you have called sincerely, there will be a response. That is my promise to you.
Don't you think most prayers come from the ego?
Therefore, even if it does, learn to refine your ego and therefore refine your prayer. We all have egos. We need it to function. But can we be sincere? Can we be humble? Can we be grateful as we ask?
Also, if we look at most of these yogic temples, right? They've been temples of meditation and never of prayer. Prayer only came, the barter system came in much later. You get my daughter married, I will shave off my head, some such thing, right? Initially, prayer was not even a part of the yogic tradition, am I right? It was only meditation. And which is why you don't have murtis, and idols came in much later. If the temples were originally temples of meditation and all of this came in much later, shouldn't that be our natural nature, to meditate and not to ask for something?
So here's the thing. When the divine has created such diversity, there are different strokes for different folks. Each unit will have its unique way back to source, right? किसी को कर्म योगा चाहिए, किसी को ज्ञान योग चाहिए, किसी को भक्ति योग चाहिए, किसी को हठ योग चाहिए. Different people are wanting to connect with the divine and the source and go back into their sacred union. Someone says, I want my wedding in Bali. Someone says, I want it in a temple in Kashmir. So I'm making a joke here.
Yeah.
But there are as many ways to your
Desires.
suhag raat.
True that.
As there are people, right? So I don't think the great mother in her compassion would ever put down one way or the highway, right? I mean, it's like there are infinite ways, you know?
Okay. Can you give us
Yeah.
one such mantra?
Yeah. Let me just give you the simplest one, okay? I would just say it is Om Ma. Om Ma. And it is the sound to activate your antaratma, your soul, right? So think of Om as Shiva and Ma as Shakti. You are a child of Shiva and Shakti. You have a divine father, you have a divine mother, you have a consciousness and you have an energy. So when you say Om Ma, it's like your unique fingerprint and call to your soul. Om Ma, I am calling, the name of my soul is Om Ma, because Om Ma is the child of Om and Ma. That is me, my soul.
Aha.
Right? So let's just do that. Let's just do 3 calls. And you can say this is one way to activate your psychic being, your soul, which is deep inside the cave of your heart. There's a Hridaya Guham. Deep inside the Anahata, beyond the Anahat chakra, there is a subtle sacred heart. And
Okay.
that is the soul center, the temple of the soul, right? Inside
You know
that.
the Brahma Kumaris?
Yeah.
I just met a Brahma Kumari in the ashram when I was in silence, and she said they say the soul resides here.
Yeah.
I said in the Agna Chakra, no, they said somewhere behind.
Yeah.
So where is it exactly?
So it depends on what, maybe this
Yeah.
is just a matter of
Conjecture.
terminology.
Okay.
The way I understand it and the way Sri Aurobindo and Mother describe these divinities or centers of... Finally, there's only one divine. Now, you can call that the soul, you can call this the soul, you can call this the soul. But for the sake of differentiating these 3 dimensions of the one, we call the divinity inside the cave of the heart as the antaratma or the soul, the psychic being, right? And then that which is beyond the forehead, the Agnya chakra, where the level of duality and separation between I and other, right, begins. If you break through that, you connect to what's called the cosmic divine. You can call it the soul of the universe, the Jagadatma, right? That too is a soul.
Yeah.
Right? And then if you go even beyond that, beyond the crown, above, you can go beyond this creation into the supreme that exists before the creation, the transcendent self that's beyond creation, right?
Oh.
And that can be tapped from beyond the crown chakra. So when I'm teaching yoga, I always begin by opening these 3 centers, right? So you call the Shakti of the soul with Om Ma, and you call the Shakti of the Jagadatma or the cosmic consciousness with Om Shri Ma, right? Because Shri is supposed to be the body of the universe. Shri, right? So if you say Om Shri Ma,
How is she the body of the universe?
Shri Yantra, Shri
Yeah, Vidya.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Shri Vidya, that when the Divine Mother creates, she becomes this universe, and the name of that is Shri. The word, the invocation is Shri, and is therefore the sound of the most auspicious, right? Shri. The creation is Shri, and when you say Om Shri Ma, it's like I'm calling the soul of the creation. When you say Om Ma, I'm calling this soul of this individual being, right? And then beyond, from the crown, if you want to attain the Satchidananda consciousness, the transcendental self, then the mantra given by Sri Aurobindo is Om Anandamayi Chaitanyamayi Satyamayi Parame. Ananda, Chaitanya, Satya. Sat, Chit, Ananda. The mother of the 3. Right?
So how many times should I be chanting this? Each of these?
I think if you do each one 3 times with real sincerity, you are good to go.
Anytime during the day?
Anytime during the day.
Okay.
So if you want, maybe that's what I'll take you through, because
Sure.
this is what I teach in all my yoga classes, my cellular meditations. Like, if you really want to do yoga, which means you want to invoke the divine and do the practice in connection with the divine, then you have to open these 3 centers and call that Shakti in, and then let that Shakti do the yoga. Right?
Aha.
So I always begin with these 3 openings.
So basically in a partnership with the creator.
Absolutely.
As you're doing the yoga, the asanas also for that matter.
Yeah. And then I create what's called a mantra breath technique, which is you have opened the heart to Om Ma, you've opened the mind to Om Shri Ma, and then with your hand on your heart and the other hand on the belly, you do this inhale in and up, exhale down and out to the mantra Om Ma, Om Shri Ma. Gather your whole self, taking your lower self up to your higher self with Om Ma, through the heart, aspiring for the higher, through the soul. And then Om Shri Ma, it's like you're receiving the grace, the descent of spirit down. So this is the soul and that's the spirit. And then that's the supreme. That's how I like to differentiate these 3. Soul, individual soul, universal spirit, and supreme self. Right? Supreme source. So you can say soul, spirit,
Soul,
source.
spirit, and
Source.
source. Okay.
Got it? So I take my being, my lower self, up into the spirit through my soul, Om Ma. And I do Om Shri Ma. When I'm exhaling, I'm receiving the descent of spirit into this mind-life body, right? So I am divinizing my breath by not just breathing. I am mantra breathing. It's a jap, right? So you're just going, when I'm inhaling, my silent call is Om Ma. And I actually feel my whole energy reach into my soul fire and go up, Om Ma. And Om Shri Ma, I receive the descent of the spirit and the grace and send it out into the whole Aadhar, right?
And what are some of the benefits that I can reap if I do this practice regularly?
For sure, at all these three levels, at a mental level, peace, a sense of sthirata, right? A sense of, actually, the way they say is samata, shanti, sthirata, right? So, samata is like a equanimity in the mind, right? A sense of samabhav. Whatever is happening, you will not react. You will be able to be present enough, centered enough. That's sthita pragya, right? To be able to respond to a situation and not get triggered and activated and emotional, right? You will respond. So that is a samata in the mind. Shanti in the vital, in the emotional layer, right? It's the prana kosh which gets is utal, putal, and lust, anger, hatred, greed, jealousy, right? All the words are there in Sanskrit, right? And so when you bring the divine energy into your vital layer, that force has the capacity to contain and control these lower emotional basic drives that hijack us normally, right? So shanti in the vital, and then sthirata in the physical. So sthirata is a kind of stillness, a kind of stability, right? You're not having this nervous itchy energy, right? There is a kind of
Thera, composure.
Yes. And when that is there in the physical, as I said, there is a peace. And where there is peace in the physical, there cannot be disease.
So I was telling you how I came across you. I think it was 11 or 11:30 in the night one day. And I see this reel pop up on Instagram. And it is by you, and it is in the Shakti Kumbh page. And to me, up until that point, Shakti Kumbh was just an aggregator of all these women spiritual leaders or yogic sadhakas. And then it was later, when we actually touched base in person, that I got to know that you're the founder of Shakti Kumbh. It's a beautiful page, very underrated. Unfortunately, doesn't have the kind of traction that it needs. What is Shakti Kumbh? How did you think of Shakti Kumbh, and what is the plan?
Yeah, wow. Thank you for landing on the page and acting on that. That's why we are here. I think all of us, just like you do this beautiful podcast, and it has a life of its own. I'm sure you can't say, I, Shloka, created this. Because sometimes each one of us individually can put in all the time, money, and effort, and it will not bear fruit. Right? So somewhere you have to realize when something takes hold, there is a hand or an energy or a force beyond you that is working through you to get something done in the world, right? At some point, this idea started coming that there should be Shakti centers. If Shankaracharya could create 4 mathas in the 4 corners of the country to revitalize Sanatan Dharma, and if today we're talking about regenerating Bharata Shakti for the renaissance of India, it's been predicted India has to have an awakening. She has to awaken to her own soul, reawaken her own Bharata Shakti. She is a Bhavani Bharati. India is not a piece of land. India is a being. She's a goddess. She is Bhavani Bharati. Okay? And this land is her body. Just like my soul has this body, Bhavani Bharati has this land called currently India, which currently the map is being discussed.
Yeah.
There is a spiritual map of India, which the mother has very clearly defined. When you come to Pondicherry in the playground, you see there are pictures of her sitting with that map of India as if establishing her seal on it, saying, as the Divine Mother, this is what I recognize as the spiritual map of India. And there's a photograph with Jawaharlal Nehru, Indira Gandhi, and Lal Bahadur Shastri sitting next to her with that map of India. So it's in that context, I was thinking, if Shakti has to awaken, if the women of India need to first of all empower themselves, this is the age of women. We need more women in leadership, not to deny men, but to balance and bring equality and complementary force to move forward together. Heaven and earth are held up by masculine and feminine, right? You can't have only one and not the other.
Right.
It's like saying, I only want to inhale and I don't want to exhale. No wonder you're dying, right? So to restore balance, we need more women waking up to their Shakti. And so this idea that when Sanatan Dharma was in a low, weak state, there comes a Shankaracharya who establishes Matha and for the regeneration of Sanatan Dharma. The thought came to me, we need Shakti centers in the four corners of India and in the center of India where women can come and train to become yoginis, integral yoginis, change makers who have awakened to their Shakti. And then they go and act in the world, in all the domains of life, as yoginis, as integral yoginis. So how can we have these four centers in the four corners of India? And again, Sri Aurobindo talks about the four aspects of Shakti: wisdom, strength, harmony, perfection. Wisdom is Maheshwari, strength is Mahakali, harmony is Mahalakshmi, and perfection is Mahasaraswati. And if you look at the map of India, isn't it so that Maheshwari is in the north of India, Mahakali is in the east of India, Mahasaraswati, the south of India, Mahalakshmi in the west of India? So I said we should have centers dedicated to the four, and of course the center is Aditi. So can we have centers dedicated to excellence in these domains? So Saraswati would be for spiritual knowledge and higher academic learning. This east can be for activism, environment, right? South can be for culture, technology, all the Saraswati areas. Business, economics in the West. Can we focus on these domains and create women leaders in these domains? Center for politics and governance, right? Drawing from that Aditi Shakti. And then all these women can be deployed for the development, integrated national development of this country. Right? This was the big vision. Then I said, center to pata nahi kab banenge, but we can do pop-up ashrams, we can do pop-up centers. So for a few days, we can run a really potent, powerful program in each of these places. So then I said, what is a pop-up ashram? I said, it's a mela, it's a Kumbh Mela, right? So I said, so we can have a pop-up center as a Shakti Kumbh. So the next one is going to happen in February 26, next year, in Odisha. And this time drawing on Mahakali. And the theme is, there is a beautiful bhajan to Jagannath my father would listen to every evening. Chaturbhujo Jagannatho, right? So the four hands of Jagannath, Chaturbhuja. So in my mind, I was thinking, what is the uniqueness of Odisha? Why are we going to Odisha? What is the unique way in which Shakti is expressed in this land, in this culture, in this civilization of Odisha? And then the realization came, it's Shakti, Bhakti, Prakriti, Shringar.
In closing, I'd like to urge to all our viewers that Shakti Kumbh is a beautiful initiative. We've heard of it from you as well. The parallels that we can draw is with the Mahakumbh. It happened after 144 years, and there was a beautiful confluence of individuals from different walks of life who came together. I don't think we've seen this kind of a confluence in a very, very long time. You had the educated, the uneducated, the people who didn't care. So can we then make this into a melting pot of people coming together with their own crafts, with their own ideas, and making this into something really big? So I would really urge all the viewers to come forward. If you have a skill, if there's some idea that you may have to develop this space, to develop this movement and take it to new heights, then you can contact the details which are flashing on the screen. Thank you so much, Nilima ji. I am floored by your knowledge. Usually I don't process information as much during podcasts because I know what's happening. But what you conveyed, every word was a breath of fresh air. It truly was something that I wasn't expecting, and something that needs to be revisited to actually get the sour of what was communicated. So thank you so much, and really hope to do many more in the future. Thank you so much for making the time and coming all the way from Pondicherry. You're gifted, you have a beautiful presence, and thank you so much for uplifting the world in your ways and doing so much.
Thank you, Shloka. May I just add my own piece on the Shakti Kumbh? I really believe Shakti Kumbh belongs to the people of India. And I'm really inviting anyone who's listening, help bring people to the next Shakti Kumbh. It's in Odisha from the 14th to the 21st of February. Mahashivratri is on the 15th. 21st of February is the mother's birthday. It's a potent time to be there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Namaskaram.
Namaskar. It's been a joy, Shloka. It's really just flowed. It's been so joyful. And I felt the presence in the room. And I hope whoever's listening to this is going to enjoy the same upliftment.
In case you'd like to be a part of our online and in-person yoga, diet and spiritual programs, you can join our WhatsApp group below where we post all our upcoming programs and give free tips on health, diet and lifestyle.